Good evening and welcome to the Gold Goats and Guns Hour here on YouTube and being live. My name is Tom Luongo and we've got a lot to talk about tonight. It is Monday, August 5th, 2019, and by God, is there a lot to talk about. I can't even keep up with it all, to be honest with you. So tonight we're going to talk about trade. We're going to talk about China. We're going to talk about Trump. We're going to talk about some of the other things that have happened today. But before I get started, let's get onto the basic stuff, you know, that dirty kind of basic shilling. We got to do that stuff. So you can find my work over at tomluongo.me. You can also find me over at moneymarkets.com every Thursday, Friday morning, something like that. You can also find me on strategicculture.org, as well as you can sign up for my Patreon if you would be so kind, and many of you have, and I greatly appreciate it, over at patreon.com/goldgoatsandguns, where you can sign up for the Gold Goats and Guns investment newsletter, which comes out monthly and which I've been working on for the last couple of days, which is why there hasn't been much new content on the blog, because it is that time of the month. Yeah, we all have that time of the month, if you know what I mean. All right, so while we wait for a few more people to pop into the stream, I could have talked about any number of issues tonight, and I could have talked about 100 different issues. Part of the reasons why I'm a little late is I wanted to get some and get some different thoughts and ideas about what's going on with Trump and the currency manipulator thing, because they just finally fessed up to something they've been threatening China with since Mitt Romney ran for president, which is labeling China a currency manipulator, which, oh, by the way, doesn't actually do very much. Pretty much empowers Steve Mnuchin to do what he's already done, which is to say, China is not really a currency manipulator. They just issued a report. I was reading the piece on Zero Hedge this afternoon. It's like just last month, they were like, well, China does fit one of the three criteria for being a currency manipulator. And then, you know, this month, and now all of a sudden, because Trump is pissed off, they're a currency manipulator. Go to the IMF, go to the World Trade Organization, try and get them to do what we want them to do. The only thing I can think of here is that Trump actually just wants to be out of the WTO and the IMF completely, and he wants to use China as an excuse to get away from all this stuff. It's about the only thing I can really think of at this point, because none of this actually matters, right? We've been here. China is a barley price manipulator. Quinn thinks so. At the price of barley, I would think. That's classic. Yeah, all this is really dumb. At the end of the day, this is just red meat for the MAGA crowd to think, oh, we're getting tough on those damn Chi-Coms and this is going to be great. We're going to kill them and yada, yada, yada. I was reading the Kyle Bass thing that was on Zero Hedge all day today, and I had to laugh because, well, Kyle Bass isn't an idiot or anything, and he is right to be betting that the Hong Kong dollar will the peg that the Hong Kong dollar has to the dollar will probably end at sometime soon, because guess what? Betting that a currency is going to depeg at some point in the future isn't really a tough bet. You know why? All currency pegs fail. They just do. And as long as you're willing to, you know, spend a little bit of money to make that bet and leave it like long dated in the market, in the options market, or whatever, however you've got that thing, you've got your exposure set to that thing, as long as you're willing to lose money every month until it actually happens, and then you win big. I mean, it's like betting that a currency peg is going to break is like playing roulette. You have no idea when you're going to win, but eventually you're going to win, and you're going to win big. So, you know, eventually you're going to hit that 150 to 1, right? The question is whether or not it's going to take you 150 throws to get there. Odds are says it's not, or whatever the hell roulette pays out when you hit a single number. 36 to 1, I think it is. But that's the basic idea. Is, you know, eventually, you know, you spin the wheel enough times, eventually you're going to be right. It doesn't mean that China has no weapons. And the way Kyle Bass and his crew, and the more I, you know, I don't know, I was reading something, it's like the guy's now aligning himself with Steve Bannon. I'm like, if you're aligning yourself with Steve Bannon at this point, you're very suspect. Good evening, Brett Harris. How are you? You made it early. Good for you. So there's a lot of ins and outs. There's a lot of ups and downs to this case. You know, there's a lot of ins and outs and stuff. Where's my drink? Where's my White Russian? But, you know, at the end of the day, I don't know what Trump is complaining about. Before Trump hit office, the Chinese continually were allowing the yuan to appreciate versus the dollar. And yet we were still running a trade deficit. For years. The yuan, I mean, since I've been following the yuan, it's come down from over 7.7 to a low of 6.05. It's back over 7. It's back over 7 because Trump has completely upset the markets and people don't know what the fuck to do anymore. I make this point over and over again and no one seems to listen. Everybody on Zero Hedges is, punish the Chi-Coms. They're terrible. They're evil. I'm like, oh no, Trump's an idiot. He doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. At the end of the day, everybody's wrong. Everybody's dumb. China is not a core economy. The United States is. Why is China not a core economy yet? Simple. China doesn't have the world's reserve currency. 63% of the world's reserves are denominated in US dollars, not in Chinese yuan. That number's rising, mind you. It's rising steadily. It's rising quicker every day that Trump does something stupid to make global trade less predictable. Every day, more reserves are switched out. The central bank reserves are switched out from US dollars to yuan or other currencies, euros, rubles, yada, yada, yada. It's all happening. It's happening in front of our face. Happening every day. De-dollarization is happening. It's nothing you can do about it. Trump is actually making it worse every time he opens his mouth. This is why I keep saying that he's an absolute and utter economic ignoramus. The title of this talk tonight is Trump Goes Medieval on Chinese trade talks. Well, guess what? He's got a medieval view of trade. Trade deficit's not going to improve when you have a $1.2 trillion deficit, budget deficit. It's not going to happen. Can't stop people from buying computer monitors and whatnot from China. It's not going to happen. Asian American, please. So it's insane. If you know, and just the sequence of events that we've been treated to over the last week has been quite scary, to be honest with you. So let's go back over this. So last week, China, like Mnuchin and company, Lighthizer, and that freaking couch potato, Wilbur Ross. I can't believe that mushroom is actually like running around. It's still our freaking trade, our, you know, this head of what the hell is he head of? Commerce secretary. That guy's a freaking mushroom, for Christ's sake. I mean, he's got moss growing on him, for fuck's sake. Whatever. This guy's out there. They go to sit down and have lunch, and the trade talks blow up before they even sit down and have lunch, because China's not going to give them anything. The United States keeps making demands on people that they know people are not going to accept. They make demands upon Iran that no sovereign nation would ever accept. They make demands on China that no sovereign nation would accept. They make demands on Russia that no sovereign nation would accept. They make demands on Lebanon that no sovereign nation would accept. They make demands on Syria, Turkey. And yet, when these terms are rejected, oh my God, you said mean things to us. You defied us. And then we do something, and then the Trump administration goes apeshit. Like, how solipsistic of a universe do you live in to think that anybody would react positively to this kind of treatment? I don't understand. But then again, I'm not president, right? Okay. So, trade talks blow up. Mnuchin and company come home. The Fed cuts only 25 basis points. Trump goes ape shit and puts tariffs on the rest of China's imports to the United States. Great. Small companies around America, small importers around America are going to be absolutely gutted by this. For no reason whatsoever, simply because Trump is playing a game that he can't win and he doesn't understand. He thinks he understands this. This is the sad part about it, but he doesn't. Labeling China a currency manipulator does nothing. What are you going to do? You're going to try and get an international coalition to come together and look at and say that China's been manipulating their currency? If they're manipulating their currency, guys, all they're doing is managing their exchange rate so that the yuan neither appreciates nor depreciates very much. I'm gonna actually show you a chart. This is a chart I put up before, and it's a chart you're not allowed to show Kyle Bass. You're not allowed to show this to Donald Trump either, because if you show it to him, he'll get angry. God damn it, they're a currency manipulator. God damn it. It's like, guys, China's real effective exchange rate for the last 3 years has been effectively flat. This is an argument I've been making for 5 years now. China will continue to do what they have to do to balance the yuan's exchange rate versus all of its trade partners. The United States keeps making it out like the United States is the only trade partner China has. I have this argument with people all the time. I have this argument with my partner. I have this argument with anybody who thinks they know anything about trade. I'm like, guys, we are not their only fucking trade partner. As a matter of fact, we're only 15% of China's trade. These people act like it's 1994, for fuck's sake. It's 2019. China's economy is $11 freaking trillion. They trade more with the EU than they do with us. By the time they're done, in 10 years, they're going to be trading $500 billion a year with Russia. With Russia alone, $500 billion a year. So you've got to understand that what China's doing here is they're allowing the yuan to depreciate versus the dollar while they're keeping it stable versus all the other currencies that they trade with. Is it in China's best interest to keep the yuan at 6.1 versus the dollar while the euro has dropped 15% in the last 9 months? Just asking, for a friend. Does it make any sense whatsoever? China's got a growing trade relationship with Russia. The Russian ruble last year devalued 25% overnight because Trump put aluminum tariffs on the world, right? I mean, has anybody looked at the Singapore dollar, which is one of the major clearinghouses for the Chinese yuan and offshore payments recently? Anybody looked at the Australian dollar, which the Chinese do a lot of business with the Australians. They buy a lot of coal. They buy a lot of iron ore. They buy a lot of natural gas. Same thing with New Zealand. Anybody looked at the New Zealand dollar recently? Anybody looked at the Vietnam dong, the Malaysian ringgit, the Thai baht? I mean, these are all currencies that most people don't even fucking know exist. And yet these are very important currencies to China and their trade. And all the Americans can do is say, oh, no, well, it's all about us. It's all just our war. And that's the way Trump is approaching us. It's all about us. Well, why do you have such a massive trade deficit? Because you fucking orange dotard. You spend $1.2 trillion more a year than you bring in. You export inflation around the world and then get angry when someone devalues their currency to offset the inflation by exporting deflation from their world, from their corner of the world. If anybody is the world's biggest currency manipulator, it's the Federal fucking Reserve. Americans should buy less cheap crap from China. If the Americans would buy a lot less cheap crap from China, if there was a lot of cheap crap for Americans to buy here at home. Why do we buy cheap crap from China? You know why? Because we can't afford to buy anything else. Because they've taxed and regulated our fucking wages to the hell and gone. It's not that fucking hard, guys. The fucking slaves pre-Civil War only owed their masters 35% of their income or 33% of their income. Today, the average tax rate in the United States is 65%. That's not good enough for the Democrats, and it's certainly not good enough for the bureaucrats in Europe who tax their people 80% of their income. Are you out of your fucking minds? If you want things to change at home, change them at home. Don't blame China for our problem. All Trump is doing is blaming China for that which he cannot change politically here at home. That's all he's doing. He's just like every other fucking president who's ever walked into the Oval Office and blamed somebody else for our problems. When our problem is we spend way more than we can afford to. Period. It's not hard. It's not tough. Stop running a structural budget deficit every year. Stop exporting debt around the world every year. And the only reason we continue to do this is because we can't, because the banking class that actually runs the fucking world doesn't want to see their asset prices fall because they're all over levered to the friggin' hilt. And if they do, they'll all lose trillions of frickin' dollars in money, in fake phony money that they think they earned honestly through rent and extraction from us, the plebes, who work for a fucking living. That's what's actually going on. If any fucking leftist would actually come into this scope and listen to what I'm talking about, they would, oh my God, and they would go, oh my God, yeah, he gets it, he gets it. Yeah, dude, but I'm not a commie. I just have a fucking brain. Which means that I'm a libertarian. This is what's going on. This is what's so unbelievably obnoxious about all of this. And then we'll throw in, we're helping to foment riots in Hong Kong. Okay, this is a bargaining chip, and this is being used like John Bolton's grinning, saying, let's stoke fucking violence in Hong Kong to try and stoke civil unrest in China while they devalue their currency in order to try and blow up their banking system and blow up the friggin' world so we can have a world war. Because this is responsible policy by balanced men. Okay. Hey, let's have the Brits and the Americans gin up a fucking war in Kashmir because, oh my God, the threat of peace might have broken out between Pakistan and India because the Pakistanis elected Imran Khan to heal the divide in Pakistan. Can't have that. We got Narendra Modi, who's the biggest fucking neoliberal fucking satrap I've ever seen in my fucking life. You see what they did today? They just threw out 70 years worth of, because India never wanted to resolve the situation. Right? The United States and Saudi Arabia kept Pakistan a freaking mess for years so that we could destabilize all of Central Asia. And now India's taking advantage of it. And stoking sectarian violence. Great. All to stop China, because India is just as pissed off about China and OBOR and all of this as everybody else is, as the United States is, because India wants to run Central Asia, because they actually think that they're capable of doing so. Wow. This is a country that doesn't even value doesn't even talk about their currency in terms of the actual currency itself, the rupee. They only talk about it in terms of the crore. That's tens of millions of fucking rupees. Oh, by the way, Australian dollar down to 68 cents. Going to get worse, by the way. Going to get worse because the U.S. dollar is going higher from here. They've just engineered. Look, the U.S. dollar on Wednesday night threatened a massive breakout to the upside. I mean, it was there. Boom, it happened. We got a monthly close above 98.5 on the USDX because the euro shot the bed. Everybody freaked out because the Fed didn't do what the world was begging them to do, because what the euro dollar markets were begging them to do. The euro dollar markets freaked out because Powell only cut 25%. I got news for you. He's going to probably cut 25 basis points again in September because otherwise he'll be lynched. And he only did so to try and, schmooze the world into like, look, we're still independent. You're not independent. You're the central bank for the fucking world. Everybody knows it. Stop angry. Stop getting upset about it. Oh, and by the way, Kevin P, just so you know, I saw a thing today. Speaking about, not having toilets in India. They had to actually start putting up signs in London which says, please don't shit in the streets. No offense to Indians or anything, but, indoor toilets. Ridiculous. It's, at the end of the day, you have to remember that it's all about the insane levels of extraction of your labor that all of this comes from, and the desire to maintain that. That is what's behind all of this. It's the desire of the people who have all of this, that have extracted all of this wealth. It's all this is about. Trump is not punching back, Hayakaton. He's just flailing ineffectually. He's doubling down on a failed policy. Hong Kong is going to have to depeg at some point, no doubt about it. Just like the Saudi Arabians are going to have to depeg at some point. Just like Argentina eventually depegged. Like every other currency peg that's ever existed on the planet had to end. When the Swiss pegged the franc to the euro, I said then, it's not going to last. How long is it going to last? Oh, I don't know. 3, 4, 5, 7 years. It could be 10. It all depends. Love it or hate it, the U.S. can't continue to be China's cash cow. We're not China's cash cow. The trade deficit is a mirage. We export trillions in debt. We get a couple $100 billion in goods in return. It's not real. It's an accounting error. It's an accounting anachronism. Martin Armstrong's talked about this for years. It's all horse shit. The trade account doesn't matter. Certainly when you're the world's reserve currency and you export dollars around the world for it. You're not being exploited. God all fucking mighty. Okay, it's two things that the MAGA crowd really needs to get the fuck out of their heads. Okay, because this is Marxist thinking. This is what gets me angry. This is the Steve Bannon shit. Okay, I guess Bannon's a fucking Trotskyite. This is the Steve Bannon shit. You're not exploited. Okay? You're not. You're not a victim. This is my empowerment portion of the show tonight. And I'm going to say it with vitriol because I'm too fucking angry to do it nicely. You're not a victim. You're not exploited. Certainly not at a national level. And you're certainly not being exploited by the Chinese. The real enemy is here at home. Just like the real enemy for the Chinese is at home. Just like the real enemy for Europe is in Brussels and in 10 Downing Street and every other goddamn worthless freaking government around this world that has fucked everything up and then wants to blame the other guy for the freaking problem. The MAGA crowd runs around like China's stolen all our freaking jobs. Mexicans have stolen all our freaking jobs. It's not true. It's not. You want to blame people? Blame the fucking politicians and blame yourselves for you have to ultimately blame yourself for voting in these fucking people, for allowing them to run a currency regime which was always designed to extract your wealth and take the profits somewhere else. This is the problem. Sorry you disagree, but it's true. The Fed's always been the real enemy. You're not exploited. At the end of the day, you have all the control. You have control. It's just going to suck. You have ways of getting around using the dollar. They exist. You can live an exploitation-free life if you want. It's just harder that way. And that's the trade-off, and that's the play, and that's the game that everybody plays. You complain about being exploited, you're not exploited. You chose it. Look, we're all freaking slaves, and we put the fucking manacles on ourselves, for Christ's sake. Are you kidding? We listen to these fucking retards, and we actually think that they have some power over us. People seem to forget that China was for all intents and purposes, our banker after 2008 and prevented a global depression. That is absolutely true. China, fucking the credit bubble that everybody says, oh, China is so freaking weak. They've got this massive credit bubble. Do you know that without that credit bubble, we wouldn't be sitting here today? Good night. Bannon's not a populist. He's a fucking gun runner and fucking Navy intelligence freaking agent provocateur, for Christ's sake. The problem with the QTARs is they've adopted the victimhood deal of the left. Exactly. They just have transferred that victimhood to China. It's the same thing. Oh, the white man. Oh, the racist. No, the Chinaman. It's the same fucking bullshit. It's like, I'm sorry. I don't give a shit. I don't care one way or the other whether you're, I don't care why you're angry about the world. Your victimhood status doesn't impress me. In 2008, the Fed could have bought all the debt. They bought so much of it. How much did they print? They printed what did they print? $21 trillion? Handed it to the banks? You want to know who Steve Bannon is? Listen to Lee Stranahan. Can't agree with you more. But listening to Lee's stuff over the weekend, and holy Christ. Holy shit, dude. I mean, I always thought, the minute I found out that Bannon was ex-Navy intelligence, that was the day that I was like, that guy's skeezy. I don't know. I used to be on his side, and I'm like, no. And then we realized that Posobiec and the rest of them is, we find out, Posobiec is his fucking butt buddy. Crazy. Now, you have to understand, though, that this is getting... You're worried about Lee's safety, Thordoom? Yeah, so am I. At least it isn't as stupid as the Japanese government's action. But this is the thing about it. This is what's really funny. We got Kyle Bass out there today, right? Talking about, he's, like I said, he's all about the Hong Kong peg. And his private group talking about behind the paywall was talking about this yesterday on my it just hit me as I was reading through the comments on the Zero Hedge article today that the same group, as Real Visions or whatever, was talking about how bad off the Japanese banks are. Now, Kyle Bass has been talking about how Japan is ready to implode since 2008. I mean, he might as well be Peter Schiff, for Christ's fucking sake, right? So I don't know how the guy makes his money. He must be really good at running covered calls on his shrinking portfolio in order to stay alive. I have no freaking idea, and to continue to extract money from morons. But hey, whatever, if you can make it work, it's a good living. So understand that there's Bass out there. Was him and his group were out there telling everybody that Europe wasn't going to implode first, that Japan was going to implode first. And we were talking about it yesterday. We were talking about it over the weekend with a couple of people from Patreon, and I was talking about it yesterday on my private market reports for my subscribers. And I said, well, it's an interesting theory, and I'm not an interesting bit of analysis, but I don't see how that tracks because I don't see any catalyst for Japan going poofda, right? Everybody's trying to make China go poofda. We're trying to we got HSBC's CEO going the way of the dodo. today. He just resigned today. We got the streets in Hong Kong are in flames. We've got, Trump going out every other day and putting more and more pressure on China to cut a deal that they can't cut. I mean, so what's the point? So they do bury Lee stuff, by the way. Guys of Index. They bury Lee Stranahan hard. And so I look at this and I say, I just don't buy it. I mean, it'd be fine if it happens. It's just, I just don't buy it. And then I realize that's Kyle Bass's group. I'm like, well, no shit. Of course they're going to run that up the flagpole, because Bass has been trying to be right about Japan for 10 years now. And I'm like, look, the truth of the matter is that Japan does everything that the United States asks them to do geopolitically. Therefore, the United States is not going to let Japan fall first. Trump is actively putting pressure on Europe, which is a fine thing because Europe sucks. And I don't really have a problem with him putting pressure on China either, other than the fact that it's going to blow back on us. We're not going to get out of any trade war with China unscathed. It's the wrong way of going about this. There's a way to decouple the United States and China's economy very easily. No problem. It's easy. It's doable. Just takes some time, but it doesn't have to be done the way Trump is doing it. But like everything else, he didn't have to bomb, the airbase at Conchacun. He didn't have to do a lot of things. But Donald Trump likes to do big things that make headlines, because Donald Trump is one, insecure, two, a bully, and three, a fucking narcissist. Cernovich is absolutely a liar. I've known that for years. Just on a side note, you guys are not talking about Cernovich and Posobiec and all the rest of them. They're all liars. Back in 2016, I kept saying to myself, where the fuck are these guys getting the money for deplorable? They invited me, by the way. I was invited to deplorable. I couldn't go. I didn't have any money. I was between jobs. I was not going to, wasn't going to deplorable. I wasn't going to go spend $3,000 to go hang out with those guys. And it's a good thing I didn't, because I would have fallen in with that crowd. Interestingly enough, I probably would have, had I gone to deplorable, I'd probably be on OANN or something like that right now. I'd probably have been schmoozed up into, Jack Posobiec territory. You think? Maybe? Garland and Lee are both great on Sputnik. As a matter of fact, by the way, guys, I will be on with them tomorrow morning. I got the invite from Eric Ladney this morning, or this afternoon, sorry. I'll be on from 9:20 to 10 o'clock tomorrow night on Fault Lines with Lee and Garland. I'm sure we're going to talk about most of this stuff. So if you don't want to, the only difference is, well, I'll do this without invective and, the F-bombs, because I'm not allowed. So... what else are we going to talk about tonight? 33 minutes in, and I'm like, I can't even get started. It's crazy. So I promised you, let's go back to what I was talking about earlier. So I promised you that I would show you what I was talking about in terms of the China's exchange rate. And this is why people are wrong. This is why the MAGA crowd is wrong. This is why Trump is wrong. This is why most commentators are wrong. They only look at things from the U.S. point of view. And when they're only looking at things from the U.S. point of view, they're trying to sell you something. This is the only solution to the problem. Whenever anybody tells you this is the only solution to the problem, they're fucking lying. At the very least, they're trying to sell you something, if not trying to lie. So here's the gig. I'm going to pop up the last 9-year chart of the 7-year chart of the real effective exchange rate for China. Now, it's a big blue line. This is the Fred graph from the Federal Reserve. This is not hard, but you can see what the real broad effective exchange rate is. The Chinese yuan set against the basket of its trade current of its trading partners' currencies, weighted for their trade, right? The percentage of trade, and there's your index. The yuan, since July of 2016, has traded in a very narrow band of about 3% for the last 3 years. Now, and this was the taper tantrum, right? The valuation taper tantrum, then the big China devaluation into 2015. Okay. But, a lot of that. But if you'll note, the Chinese yuan has been strengthening for years on a real broad, effective basis. And then the last 3 years, they've held it constant, relatively constant. Yeah, there's fluctuations, but it's relatively constant, plus or minus 3%. What's so interesting about that? Not much. That's what they're doing. Okay, that's what they're doing. It's not hard. Putin would send me to the gulag if I used that language on Sputnik. Yeah, probably. I couldn't really blame him, to be honest with you. All right, so that's what you have to understand here. What Trump is arguing for, and he's only arguing things from America's point of view. And so because he's only arguing from America's point of view, and because he only sees things in terms of trade deficits, stealing, trade surplus, good. Well, you can't, there's no way to balance trade that way. Trade balances over time. And so when you look at it from that perspective, what I just laid out, you guys are freaking hilarious, by the way. It's pretty obvious that what China's doing is managing their exchange rate in a very volatile period of time. Remember, this is the last 3 years. These are the most volatile years of the last. These are incredibly volatile times, these last 3 years. This is all post-Brexit, where the euro's been down and up, and the pound has lost 40%. And the Chinese have got a huge amount. They do a huge amount of trade with the Brits, and the pound is down 30% since Brexit. It's trading at the $1.40s. Now it's trading at $1.11. Are the Brits a currency manipulator? Trump is like bending over. Here's one for you. Trump is bending over backwards to get Boris Johnson to go for a no-deal Brexit so he can sign a friggin' trade agreement. And still at the same time, Trump is saying, oh, but if you devalue the pound, forget it. All deals are off. Like, dude, do you not understand that British labor is not worth as much as American labor? That just because today's exchange rate is what it is doesn't mean that it's real? It's stupid. And it's petty. And it's dumb. And it's beneath anybody with a fucking 3 working brain cells. And yet this fucking idiot is running around radicalizing millions of people to want to go into a fucking economic trade war with China, which is only going to land on their heads and destroy their children's lives. Because trade wars become hot wars. This is not like nothing here. China's trading within 5%, or it's not even 5%, it's more like 4%, but yeah, over 3 years must be as stable as the Swiss franc. Not more so. Remember, the Swiss franc was bound to the friggin' was pegged to the euro for fuck's sake, and they desperately had to let that go. And remember what happened to them? Then all of a sudden, when they let that go, everything like moved 40% overnight. All right, let's go look at some questions. Do you think South Korea could move into China's sphere? They seem intent on stoking hostility with Japan right now. The response from user 13 would be the Republic of Korea would move towards China if we let them, and issues with the DPRK were eased, which is true. There's no reason. This is another reason why we keep things the way they are. We don't want Korea solved. We don't want any of these things solved. We don't want India-Pakistan solved. We don't want Afghanistan solved. We don't want Syria solved. We don't want Ukraine solved. Better to have as many open wounds available as possible in order to gin up some other headline to manipulate people's perceptions about what's actually going on in the world. This is what happens. And this is and you know, I've been doing the best I can. I'm really freaking angry tonight because what Trump has done here is just monumentally stupid. I mean, in a way that I'm at the point where I'm like, you know, fuck this guy. Like every day I think, okay, maybe he'll like be reasonable. Maybe he'll actually wind up being a good president. And then he does this shit. Like, are you fucking kidding me? Come on, man. Whatever. But here's your libertarian takeaway from the evening. What's the lesson here? What's the lesson we are dealing with here? What's the subtext? Not the text. Not that thing that's above the subtext that nobody ever wants to talk about. Subtext. Never give governments this kind of power. What's wrong here is it's what I said earlier. The problem is in Washington, it's in Beijing, it's in Rome, it's in 10 Downing Street, it's in Brussels, it's in Moscow, it's in Santiago, it's in freaking Buenos Aires. Yeah. Okay. It's in all of those places. It's in Mexico City. It's in all of those places. The government is fundamentally the problem. You give these people power. You give them the ability to wield money and power in such a way that they don't have to pay the consequences for their actions, and they can wield that money and influence irresponsibly. This is what you get. You get a really crappy world that is only made livable because people are really tenacious and inventive, and in specific, incredibly awesome. Makes me sick to my stomach to watch this play out. It really does. Because there's no need for it. None at all. As others have pointed out, at least Epstein is totally out of the headlines, which I think was probably the whole point, so that they can kill him off in jail and he can never speak. Thordoom asks, hasn't Moon recently said that North and South should join economically to fight Japan? It would be strong on their part, because, you know, the truth of the matter is that what needs to happen. The Japanese are a house of cards. They have been for a long time. You know, I think about this situation, and Kyle Bass isn't wrong, but, you know, they can continue to play this game for as long as they can, and then the whole thing will collapse one day. They'll just wake up one morning and the whole thing will just vaporize. And, you know, Korea is caught between two massive powers, Japan, you know, to the east, and China to the west, and they need to be united, and that's why John Bolton won't let them be united. The lesson says El Vaquero, they'll get rid of 90% of the government, then discuss which of the remaining 10% we're also going to get rid of. Bingo! The safest city in Mexico is Quirón. They kicked the Mexican government and police out. Exactly. Not just wield money, but created out of thin air. Well, yeah, and then get to spend it at yesterday's prices with tomorrow's money. U.S. government is evil, and everywhere else. I've been off the Trump train since his first bombing of Syria. You and me, for the most part, you and me both have had to, like, kind of, you know, it's kind of like buyer's remorse. You got to spend a little bit of time. Did I get, so Stoyanovich asked, did I get a laugh out of the Western media trying to stoke a new Russian revolt against Putin with 1,500 people? No. Yeah, I did get a laugh, actually, about that. It was, will China invade? Invade where? The United States? No. Will they invade Korea? No. Will they invade the Spratlys? They already have. Didn't Putin recently legalize wife beating? North-South reunification in Korea will be really messy, way worse than Aussies and Westies in Germany. Yeah, it will be, but it'll happen. And we should be helping it along as opposed to hindering it. I'm right, says Joe Elf, but looking at history, isn't small government as hopelessly utopian as any flavor of Marxism? No. Not when you look at the technology that we have. Not when you look at it every day. The technology makes it easier for us to live decentralized lives. The forces of decentralization are rapidly outpacing, and technology is rapidly outpacing government's ability to maintain it. That looks like they are. It looks in the short term, it looks like they're building an Orwellian panopticon and social credit system, and they're trying to stay ahead of everybody. But the truth of the matter is that they have no control over this whatsoever. They just think they do. And that illusion is, and that the look of that control is paid for with money that's been pulled forward from the future, and eventually that will collapse, if not is already in the process of collapsing. And they'll be left with all this technology and all these people coming up with solutions to their problems that have nothing to do with government, and they'll just keep going. Mark Shear says, as a former court officer and corrections officer, I can tell you that Epstein is not safe in jail. No, he's not. He was put there in order to be killed and disappeared, and should be held on a military base guarded by soldiers. I think the salient thing I read recently was Martin Armstrong explaining exactly what the jail is that he's being held in, what it's for, what it's used for, how it's worse. It's as bad, if not worse, than anything you'll find in Russia or any other quote unquote horrible, dictatorship around the world. China lacks the force projection to invade the U.S. That is exactly true. And we'd be going after the food supply anyway. It takes a lot to feed 1.3 billion people. Exactly. There's no point in China's not going to invade anywhere. The Russians aren't going to invade anywhere. If you look at the structure of the Russian military, it's absolutely designed to fight within 1,000 kilometers of the Russian border. It's why we're spinning up all of these conflicts in places around the world that we want to try and get the Russians. What we're doing right now, and you can see it, is we're trying to get the Russians involved in conflicts that are outside of their comfort zone. Venezuela, Pakistan, blah, 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 in order to try and bleed them dry, bleed them white. That's what we're doing. Too bad that everybody else is doing the same thing to us, because it's more expensive for us to run our operations than it is for them to run theirs. Did you hear that China is building a new city on the Gulf of Oman in coast in Pakistan, going to move 500,000 people there? I did not see that. China is doing food deals around the world and in areas like Africa, Australia. Don't forget Russia. Russia is going to be the primary food supplier for China over the course of the next 20 years. Reunification is just a political gesture. What matters is trade and investment relation. And you're right, Warner Troy, if you're talking about Korea. And I think that is exactly what Moon wants. It's certainly what Kim Jong-un wants. It's not what the U.S. and British deep state want. Gonna put you on the spot. What is Lee's endgame with this Bongino Cernovich Pasobic gig? To out the cabal within the quote unquote MAGA crowd. Try and get everybody to understand that you're being betrayed. And you're being played. And you're being purposefully gaslit to hate the left, like the left is being purposefully gaslit to hate you, in order to foment a civil war here at home for political gain. What's Lee's endgame? Trying to stop that, because he sees how dangerous that is, just like I do. I see it very, very clearly that it's been this way. I've seen this coming I was just, in many ways, kind of thought it was part of the zeitgeist, mostly coming from the left, mostly coming from the establishment, the deep state, never really thinking about it from the MAGA perspective. And once it, but, you know, again, I have so many things I'm trying to keep track of. I can't formulate opinions on everything. I mean, I know there are people who are farther ahead on this than I am. You know, I'm just not capable of watching everything all the time. I'm just not. And write anything. If you guys want me to actually produce any work, you know, so that's that. Is China's army going to take over Hong Kong? They may have to invade. And I think we're trying to put them in the position where they do have to. And so then we can then lambaste China on the world stage and in the UN and everything else. So if Epstein dies, are we going to have half the world passing Epstein Acts? God, I hope not. Because that would legalize, you know, raping 13-year-old girls for fun and profit. China has had major crop failures this year due to army worms and flooding. Guess what? So have we. So has Russia. Food prices are going to rise. It's going to be it's going to get worse before it gets better. It's not going to get better here. This is a big deal. Go look at grain future prices. Okay? I drove through Arkansas. I drove through Oklahoma. I drove through places where I drove through Georgia and other places. It's terrible. You know, the corn was brown and, you know, this tall. It was crazy. NASA spent $50 million developing a pen that would work in zero-G. The Russians used a pencil. Yep, never forget that. Never forget that. Chris Bond, so Reckless Abandon says, hey, to respond to Pat Goodspeed, who asked me about what's his endgame, he said, because Bongino is a liar, along with most of Fox News, to protect Browder and his role in setting up the Trump Tower meeting. Exactly. That's one angle. And there's so many others. But that's part of it as well. The Civil War angle seems to be working quite well. I have to agree with you. Seems that the effort to turn Americans against each other is going swimmingly. I know. And why do you think Lee is on about this? More Russian sanctions by Trump for the bogus Sergei Skripal poisoning. Again, British deep state. The through line through all of this, which I didn't really discuss today, but it's something that you guys have to realize, that when you look at all of the provocations over the last couple of weeks, or certainly the last month and a half, since Trump declined to go to war with Iran, every one of them has a common through line: the Brits. It's all about the British deep state trying to get the Americans to do what they want them to do in order to stop any integration of the Russians and the Chinese and the Iranians of the heartland. That's what this is about. And it's all about that old money trying to keep that dream alive of bringing the empire back. They're not done. They're not done trying to get the colonies to do what they want. It's one of the things that scares me about Brexit, to be honest with you, the more I think about it. Been driving through Ohio and Indiana all spring. Fields all flooded. Maybe 20% have been planted. Exactly. It's crazy how bad it is. And notice that no one's talking about it. And part of the reason why it's not happening, part of the reason why you're not seeing massive inflation in the futures markets, is because Trump has also lightened up the need for, has lightened up on the rules regarding reblending of ethanol into gasoline. So what's happening here is a lot of ethanol plants are going under, and therefore it's lightening the load. It's lightening demand for corn, and therefore that's why corn's not trading at $7 a bushel. And Boris Johnson will certainly not curb any drive for empire. No, he won't. He will not. Yes. Silver lining to the corn situation: no ethanol in my gas. I believe our so-called leaders are clinically insane and want to get us into a civil war and possibly a nuclear war. Go look up the Georgia Guidestones. It explains a lot. It's pretty obvious that that's what they want. That they're willing to play that game in order to get what they want. They're willing to blackmail us with nuclear war somewhere in order to get what they want. In order to get us to submit, we still have to say no. Do fake billionaires and real blackmailers actually spend any time in jail? I'd like to see video proof. Good question. I am enjoying Jacob Rees-Mogg on the front bench as well. I haven't watched him recently, but that first day he was there, it was beautiful. I don't know that Boris Johnson is going to do what he needs to do. Nigel Farage is now completely convinced that Boris is going to betray Brexit after his first week in office, and he started backpedaling about the backstop and some other things. And he's absolutely going to most likely try and do the Trump thing, which is to take Theresa May's withdrawal agreement, remove the backstop, get a couple other bullshit little concessions on the political declaration, and then call it a brave new deal and tout it as a big win a la Trump, like what he did with fucking NAFTA. He made NAFTA worse in every friggin' way imaginable, but they got the Mexicans like one or two concessions to, I don't know, raise their wages or some stupid shit. So Stoyanovich says the State Department is an MI6 tool. It's filled with children and grandchildren of ex-Nazis and rabid Russophobes. You're damn right about that. And I was reading an article this morning that FDR was advised to nuke all of the State Department and start from scratch because they all worked for Churchill. Boris is really good at generating headlines at will, kind of like Trump, right? Okay, guys, I think my voice is about shot, and my attention for this is about over. This has been a really good talk, as always. We live in an insane world. It's spiraling out of control really quickly. I can't make heads or tails of 9/10 of the things that are coming at me on a daily basis. I'm not even sure what to write about. And now that I'm safely ensconced back in my home, where all of my normal distractions are, it's going to get even worse. So I will say one thing. Being on vacation and having very little of your own stuff kind of focuses you. I almost want to live on the road. It'd probably be better. I'd probably be better at my job. All right, you guys take care. You have a great night. It was, as always, if you like what you heard tonight, please give a like and subscribe down below. FYI, I thought it really funny that so many people on my last stream from Friday night, which I titled, "Is Tulsi Gabbard the new Ron Paul?" So many libertarians came in and go, "No, fuck no, she's a socialist." I'm like, guys, did you watch the video? It's just the title. And yet, so many Gabbard supporters subscribe to the channel. We picked up 60 people from that thing. So, as always, it was fun. It was real. It was fun. I don't know if it was real fun. You guys take care. We'll talk Friday. I'll try and maybe do one of these on Wednesday. I don't know. It's going to be really tough. I have a ridiculous schedule this week. So, as always, be good. We'll keep your stick on the ice.